So let's get going. We'll describe the day today. We have 3 hours together. There's 3 parts of this, but they don't fall exactly into the 3 hours between breaks. But we're going to go over the fundamentals, a little bit about my experience and how I got interested in this whole decision support, financial analysis business. We'll talk about the science of return on investment. We've got 19 benefits, and we're going to focus on 9 of them today. And we'll have a perspective on fee and profit for the contractor, but also on savings for the owner. We've got some metrics on overall savings, but we're going to dive right into how those metrics are generated. So what's in it, what's not. So there are some benefits of BIM that really should be considered. They won't be considered today. You may use BIM to save lives. And so we don't try to put a dollar value on that. You may use BIM to win work. Today we won't put a value on that. We're going to talk about how key the design is and how it triggers these dominoes, either of success or failure. It's so much of the building block on everything else that turns into success on your project. And then in terms of engagement, we'll just take a little while to say, okay, if you have now justified the cost of BIM and you're targeting BIM in the right way, how do you deal with the people that are going to have to change the way that they've been working? So introducing tension and challenge into a culture. How do you do that to make it fun and achieve your targets? So, we're going to be focusing on this middle section of this relationship development phases that I like. If, like with Andy, I understand this particular customer, the kind of projects that he's doing, the budgets. If I'm going to help Andy in a workshop and his people, I like to really make sure that I understand, have they had good performance? Have they had any problems in the past with this particular customer or this particular geography or the teams that they're working with? Successes, is there some urgency to the projects? I like to have the workshop, and then the third phase would be talking about the initiative and the personnel that you have. Getting executive support for this. Maybe proving, not only doing BIM, but setting performance targets for BIM, but also measuring against that performance and how to make it feel like it's coming in phases and you're achieving things and making it fun. So I'll just briefly go over my experience. What got me so interested in this, starting way back in the 70s when I started my field engineering career. I was building in 3D, doing layout and control, and when I moved into some of my larger projects, like in the hydroelectric power, it really began to be really evident that I could be a better project engineer or better field engineer if I could just get this three-dimensional stuff down. I did a bunch of stuff for a bridge. I kept my XYZ coordinates on an old calculator for our projects in Houston, our water and wastewater plants. We did hand-drawn three-dimensional images, and then I finally got to do my first three-dimensional CAD model on a hydroelectric project in New Hampshire. And I began to see that the field enjoyed this, our specialty contractors enjoyed this, the drilling and blasting enjoyed having it in 3D, the concrete, the preformed, prefabricated forms enjoyed the 3D. It just began to be this explosion of potential value. We used it in Euro Disney on It's the roller coaster near Paris. And this is the project where I met Andy, I think for the first time, here in Massachusetts. And we did our first crude four-dimensional modeling. Also in Boston, the New England Aquarium, we found clashes and that was back in 1997. And we used it to plan safety and security for a Museum of Fine Arts here. So the workshop has gone around the world. It's been a fun ride to get to travel and meet elite construction professionals around the world. There's no question, but what I see out there is a real transformation. It's driven by the financial impact of this, but there's a lot of momentum going out there. There's no question, but it's also spotty, so it takes off in a certain geography. But a lot of people ask me, please, help me explain return on investment either to my owner or to my executive. And they want it simple. When I go around the world, I see this broad spectrum of maturity. It takes a while to get up to speed. I also see this internal conflict in these organizations there. You've got executives oftentimes kind of standing back, not really wanting to put the pedal down on this. And more than anything else, I feel like I've got this library of research that's very, very powerful. But when I present the research, quite often it seems like nobody's read about this stuff. And that may be overstating it. And that's, again, there's a wide spectrum around the world. How many people have really looked into what happens to your performance when you invest in BIM? In terms of goals for the company, I see that they're very simplistic. I do not see a lot of sophistication out there around the world setting real performance targets backed up by predictive indicators. And I also see just the beginning of the harvesting the performance possible from big data. So it is a gnarly question, and we won't spend too much time talking about what do people really want. When they ask me, Ken, I've got an executive, I've got an owner, and we need to invest in BIM in order to get the financial benefits out, but they see the investment, they don't see the answer, or they don't see the return. The complexity of it comes from the fact that every project is different, every contract is different, every group of stakeholders has its own personality and level of expertise. On some projects, prefab is a great opportunity. In some projects, it's not. Sometimes the owner is very much in the game, and the owner understands that there's real potential financial savings in the downstream and the operations and maintenance phase, but some even aren't even ready to leverage BIM in order to harvest that. So the workshop is really designed to uncover all this and then look for where the real money is on each individual project. Today will be a simulation of a workshop. Andy and I have already gone through all the calculations, if you will. The ordinary workshop has a set of rules, but in general, when I talk about return on investment, I'll emphasize these three highlighted things. This is not about products. We spend 4 hours together and we just talk about what are the financial benefits, how much, what does the research tell us, and who's going to enjoy that benefit. We emphasize research because this is not about my opinion, it's about your opinion. In the workshop, the participants are looking at the research and saying, well, I think on my project, this is what we did do, or this is what I think we will be able to do. And I also emphasize discipline. Going through the workshop is very hard work. You'll see today it'll be difficult for you to kind of hang in there as we talk about all these different numbers and research figures. So if you're ready to work, a workshop is a good way to go. The total library that I have is 80 studies. I've got a few listed here. They're from around the world. Stanford University is definitely one of the strongest in the world, and the Center for Integrated Facilities Engineering. But from Texas to the UK, the University of Salford, Israel, Maryland, Southern California, Canada, University of British Columbia, and the Netherlands. There's evidence coming in from all over the world that you can use that helps you with your analysis, and it will help us today. So let's look at one of the most powerful single metrics that's out there in my mind right now. Thank you. It comes from the UK. The UK is just really starting to mandate as a government BIM on all projects over 50 million, soon to be 5 million pounds. And they're under pressure to explain what's going on here. You've been implementing BIM. What they're expecting is a 1% cost. So if we have 100 million pounds of work, $100 million worth of work, you're going to have to invest $1 million to get all-in BIM benefits. But the net savings is 5%. So you invest $1 million and you get $6 million back in terms of financial benefits. Now if that's true, and I think it is, and we'll see today if Andy's evaluation is going to come in that range, if that $5 million is actually going to come back to us, that tells us we should really understand what's going on. The next thing that is really amazing about the UK's experience is that they have doubled the percentage of projects that finish on time and on budget. They've got 400 billion pounds now being delivered on time and on budget. It used to be 33%, now it's 66%. And so this news is probably one of the fastest global messages in my mind. Well, let's go to an industrial project. This one is a $100 million project. They took the time to model after the design was done, and they found 500 serious problems in the design. Not just because of clashes, but walking through with the operations staff. And they, after the project was completed, they calculated $10 million cost savings. So this is 10%. So we've got 10% here. Also 9.8% coming in from a project in the UK at the Endeavour House. So this is an office building. It's on an airport property. Independently audited, showing a 9.8% cost savings. So, and from Stanford, the university, this is a study of 32 different projects. A savings of up to 10% of the contract value through clash detections. So we're going to come back to this, but let's just ask a good question. The savings that we're talking about here is designing construction costs. And so what we're going to do today is also ask the question, how much savings can happen if we set the stage when we do the design and construction and deliver an intelligent model set up for downstream use during operations and maintenance. this analysis done for the San Diego Community College indicates that they expect to save a total of 14.7% of when they include the life cycle savings. So these are extraordinary numbers. So this would indicate that we might be able to save 5 to 10 million on a $100 million project, but we may save, when we add up the net present value of those savings over the next 10 or 20 years, we may be able to get to 14 or 15%. So great big numbers, great big exciting potential value that we might be able to harvest. How can we go after that? Is there more? Are we just getting started? Are we getting 5% now? So the workshop has 19 benefits. They're listed here. If we want to be expedient about today, we're going to pick a segment of those, and then we're going to focus first on design. So just some quick metrics from the research. If you take a look at, if you pick one word to define what's the most important thing for BIM, that's where the money we're going to harvest, it'll be, for the owner it will be operations and maintenance, but for the whole design and construction team it will be about rework. And so a great piece of research comes from FAEC, identifying the, this is a causal diagram, a root cause. What are the root causes of rework? And I picked some out that I call the dominoes of failure. One causes the other, and they create an avalanche of rework. And they all stem, a lot of them stem from design. So this study, going back to the 1990s, I think is still true today. 79% of the problems originate in the design phase and cost as much as 12% of the contract amount. So this would be a very powerful source or target if your BIM implementation can go after that 12% of rework. Another study comes from Chelson, rework costing 4 to 14% of the direct cost of work. And the contractors spend up to 30% of their profits on reworking errors, a newer study. I'm going to skip this one. We've made our point. So the dominoes of failure, if we take a look at design, and we're going to take these are basically design. It could be in our data collection. We have problems when we use 2D in thinking, 2D in communicating, and now we have incomplete coordination. We have errors and omissions that go out to bid to the subcontractors. They generate requests for information. Some of those just cost $1,000 or $1,500 to get all the answers back, but some of them turn into change orders of course. Some of those are preventable change orders. Those cause rework, especially if they arrive late in the field. That causes delay. The delay causes acceleration in second shift. Second shift and acceleration is where we get a lot of our injuries and our claims and our blaming. So we're going to grab some of these, have Andy help us out with this particular project. He's done another project with a lot of BIM capabilities. He's moving to this new one. What is the increase in performance that he might be able to expect in this coming project versus the old two-dimensional paper-based environment? So, the project has been described. It's 500,000 square feet.
Correct.
And the dollar amount is
It's what did I say? It's upward of 400 million. Was it? No, 250. Sorry.
250
yes.
million. So this is still early, and this is just an approximate budget, and so because it's not in really launched design yet.
That's correct. It's conceptual only, so just sort of big ballpark numbers. Yep.
Okay, so when I talk to an audience, a mixed audience, and they have a bunch of projects they could be modeling, I quite often ask them, pick a project where you've got experience, it's typical of the projects that you do. So you have a baseline that goes back in history, and now you're moving to BIM, and you're trying to find out where the financial benefits will be. The particular challenge, this is urban.
It is. Yep.
And could you just describe the kind of contract that you have and the folks that might be on your team? Have you worked with them before and so on?
Sure. So this is it's a CM at risk contract. It will likely be design assist contracts for the MEP subcontractors, maybe curtain wall. Like I said, it is a very BIM-centric approach. Everybody's expected to perform using those tools, including things like co-location. So that's the general format is, and it's subcontractors that we've worked with many times before. We know what to expect. They know us. We all know how each other works. So
they expect to have to do BIM submissions.
Absolutely.
Intelligent. Yes. And so it's right in your contracts.
It is. All that's in the contracts.
And in the Boston area, it's BIM basically understood. Do you ever do a project without BIM now?
I couldn't, not in the Boston, Cambridge area, no. I couldn't imagine it.
No. So the whole geography has basically moved to BIM. So
right.
Around the world, around the country, Boston is a kind of a unique place. I think Northern California, the Bay Area is also very advanced. Denver's advanced. But there are parts of the country and parts of the world that BIM has not moved as far along. So what I've asked Andy to do is to compare the two-dimensional way to the modern, to this all-in BIM way, harvesting as much as possible, even though his projects have really become very, very mature. And they may be harvesting 40, 60, 80% of BIM, but the BIM potential. But we're now going to analyze the ultimate potential in these areas. Okay. And this is a 500,000 square foot facility, approximately.
More or less. Right.
Okay. So we would, as part of the analysis, we would fill out these budget categories, focusing particularly on general conditions, labor, and contingency. And we acknowledge that if the owner can come in, help us understand how they might, their current cost of operations and maintenance, and then we use the research to generate that. It's a great thing to have an owner in the workshop and have the owner's input. So everybody would brainstorm a little bit, looking at where the numbers are. Okay, you put your $250 million project together. Let's take a look at where the money's been going and take a look at where the waste might traditionally reside in a two-dimensional environment. So design, it's huge. This is a research piece that comes from University of Southern California. This researcher keeps generating some very powerful stuff. You can see, if you want to just quickly make your help your eyes focus on the purple, you can see the purple going down as we get toward construction. Well, that is the schedule variation. If I move to BIM, do I take more time with BIM or less time with BIM? And so the purple is taking more time. You can see that going down. If you look at the red bars, you can see that's actually 0 to 50% less. I'm taking less time when I move to BIM. So you can see this is a trend. There's more effort in the beginning to get your model up and running, and then your durations actually can get shorter. And pretty dramatic, the shortening in the construction phase. This is that Endeavor house again where they saved 10% or 9.8% of the cost, but 18% in drawing production. So here's another one. This is the Lott and Barber Architects study. And overall, when you look at CAD versus BIM, overall savings of 680 hours on this project, a 37% reduction. Now this is one of those categories, if you will. Design is the category that probably moves around the most. And Andy, you come from a design background.
That is true.
Luckily, we got you enticed over to construction, where so you spread your wings. What would you say is your projection, looking at this research and going by your experience, if you look at the two-dimensional design hours and time, is there any difference between CAD, 2D, and BIM?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these numbers look right to me. I've drawn by hand. I've done the CAD thing, and we're doing BIM now. And there's definitely, I know, right? And there's definitely a big difference, and part of that is the technology, and part of it is the process.
So, will there be a difference in your calculations? Shall we put some financial benefit directly during the design phase, or does it come later?
No, there's definitely less time spent in the design phase, certainly for production. What we did find is that some of the time that gets spent up front on the BIM side of things is spent by senior people who might not have been engaged as early or as thoroughly as before. But what we find is that they spend those hours earlier, but those hours get there are savings overall, right? So with more senior people earlier, making better decisions, creating better information in the models, but then they go away, and there is an overall savings of time.
Okay. So let's talk about requests for information. So there are a bunch of studies, and they're actually, if we look at requests for information as starting with a problem or something needing clarifying, it could be an error, an omission. There's a study that has a category called illogical design. And there's also inconsistency from sheet to sheet. But our RFIs is a category. I'm going to skip that one. I just want to mention that RFIs is not only an expensive process, but it's very sensitive that the economic impact of having hundreds or thousands of RFIs comes in two forms. Just the process of resolving those, but the impact in terms of when you find them. So what I'm asking Andy now is, can you reduce the cost of RFIs in looking at the number, but also can you move those so that you identify them earlier and you resolve them quickly and easily with a model-based process. So Andy Berg is from, this is Andy Deshane, this is another Andy. He's a advanced construction thinker, and Messer Construction is in Cincinnati. They did 4 years of research on $1 billion worth of their portfolio, analyzing what happens when you implement BIM versus no BIM. And the results were pretty dramatic. We're going to come back to these in change orders, but the results in terms of RFIs, a 72% reduction in RFIs. Now, it was even higher when the designer created the model, but the 72% refers to when the contractor develops a construction model from the design input. Mortensen, an award-winning project, their performance measurement indicates an 80% reduction in RFIs. And Walsh Construction, actually Archer Western, part of Walsh, came up with 75% reduction in RFIs on a water and wastewater treatment plant. We're going to come back to this one on schedule as well. But so 75, 80. What's your thought, Andy, on you've got a 500,000 square foot office. It's a high-tech biotech office. You've got $250 million worth of work you've got to push through design and construction. What would you expect ordinarily in terms of RFIs?
I mean, I think you're looking at a couple of thousand easy.
2,000 RFIs.
Sure.
2,000 RFIs. So it's almost 1,000 RFIs per 100 million. And if you may have a number that you use in your own calculations, in your own company, when you calculate the average cost of these. But around the world, what I encourage people to do is just think about the people that are engaged. You find a clash, you find an error, you find something that needs clarification. It surfaces in the subcontractor level quite often, or in the field. It goes to the subcontractor, it goes to the general contractor, then to the design team. The design may involve a few members of the team. Answer gets developed, documented, and then it goes all the way back to the field. The whole process may cost how much?
Even for a no-cost RFI, right? Somebody asked a question and you had to go around the loop and come back. I mean, if you look at people's time, that's $1,000. I mean, as a number.
As a conservative,
sure,
conservative number, $1,000 per RFI. So you would have expected 2,000 RFIs, and a conservative number is $1,000 a piece. So that's $2 million. What's your number in terms of how much BIM may be saving you? What's been your experiences? Have RFIs in number gone down when you go through the all-in BIM process?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the numbers up here, 75% or 80%, that I can believe that. My direct experience was somewhere 50% or maybe a little above that. So maybe we're a little bit more pessimistic about those bigger numbers, but 50% still a solid. That's a real number.
Okay, so the savings that we'll put in the calculator then is 2,000 originally expected, a 50% reduction, so 1,000 reduced RFIs and $1,000 a pop on average. Okay, so we got improved design, not really money coming to us from design, but money coming to us as the team doesn't have to focus on a bunch of errors and omissions that stem from design. So this does bring up a question. What are those people going to do now that they don't have problems to solve? In fact, one superintendent has already announced that the one thing he doesn't like about BIM is he doesn't have so many problems to solve. That's where he found his value. That's what he enjoys doing, is problem solving. So if we don't have so many problems surfing, if we don't have these people running around, quite often in my workshops I have somebody saying, well, you know, look, we're not going to reduce staff. Well, what are you going to do with that savings if they're not running around? So what I encourage people to do is to think about, calculate the time savings and put a value on it. So in this case, it's a spread out across all the folks that are working on RFIs, and there's $1 million. There's $1 million worth of them running around they don't have to do anymore. Either reduce, maybe you can get somebody to pay for it, but either transform their purpose so it now focuses on quality or schedule or safety. If they can't be utilized to do something better, they can be doing more prefabrication. If they can't be utilized to do something better, then go ahead and reduce the staff. But if you repurpose that money, make sure that your initiative, your BIM initiative, gets credit for having them do something more valuable than chase down a bunch of unnecessary RFIs. So let's go to change orders now. We've got better design, we have fewer RFIs, and now the question is, what is happening out there in terms of change orders? Are there preventable change orders in the old world that are just not surfacing now? What is the experience? What does the research tell us? Research tells us back in 2007, this listed as John Coons as the author. He was a co-author. I have to get proper citing on this. Judy, I get the right one. But 40% elimination of unbudgeted change. Now, a lot of projects around the world are having at least 5% contingency for construction, and a lot of projects have another 5 to 10 for the owner's contingency in case something goes wrong, or in case they change their mind on something. So there will be, in that contingency, there will be money spent on value added and preventable non-value added change orders. But 40%, up to 40%. From San Diego, again, this professional engineer, somebody who's very interested in performance measurement and lean construction, David Umstadt. San Diego's experience with BIM, the errors and omissions go from 1.1 or 3.3 with no BIM to 1.1, so 1/3 of the errors and omissions, and more than a 50% reduction in change orders. A 52% reduction in change orders. This is one project done in a lot of detail, similar projects, Project A, Project B, and a 39% reduction. By the way, if there's going to be one piece of research that you do look at, this one that came from Canada, which is a compilation of ROI studies on BIM-driven projects. It's a great resource. This one is a 39% reduction in change orders. Another one from the same source, dramatic, almost 90% reduction in change orders. Andy Berg from Messer, his 30 projects, $1 billion worth of projects studied, change order reduction 55%. So, have you experienced that? What would you ordinarily expect in the two-dimensional world? Set aside some money for the potential of change orders. What might you set aside, see for a contingency set aside for change orders?
I would say it's going to be, well, it's going to be somewhere under 5, maybe 4%.
Yeah.
Was that
so your overall contingency would be 5 to 10%.
Yes, right, correct.
And this is
construction contingency.
Preventable, non-value added change orders. The 4 is your non-value added change orders.
Yes, correct.
We'd like to eliminate all 4%. That would be 4% of 250 million would be $10 million. But what is your estimate of what would you like to use in your calculations?
Reducing preventable change orders. I think 50%. I think cutting those in half is that's a pretty good mark to be able to hit. I would definitely expect that we could reduce that in half.
So when I get done workshops around the world, quite often I say, if you want to boil this down to something simple for the team, a project objective for BIM, reduce change orders with them in every possible way that you can think of. Reduce change orders for BIM and BIM will pay for itself. The RFIs are a predictive indicator of change orders. The design quality is a predictive indicator of change orders. The change orders are going to have the Andy's project would likely have a larger contingency for all the change orders, including value-added opportunities for the project team, but 4% would be set aside for preventable, non-value-added change orders, and the 50% would be that percentage that can be reduced from the two-dimensional, move into BIM. So I believe that's $5 million, because 4% of 250 is 10 million, and you're expecting your BIM initiative to actually reduce that from the two-dimensional world in the BIM implementation by 50%.
Just a note on that. As we go forward, I can see that the contingency we're going to hold at the very beginning of the project, that number is going to go down to begin with, because we know what we're going to get from the tool.
So your team is actually now voluntarily, in order to be competitive,
yes,
you're reducing the contingency because the market won't allow it anymore. It won't pay for it.
Right, and having done it recently, and now with this sort of similar or same team going forward on another very similar project, we know what to expect. So that out of the gate contingency number is going to be lower than what we would have carried previously. That doesn't really factor into what we're doing here. Just a little comment on where this is headed.
So the way that I see Andy's culture at Consigli is they're becoming more and more scientific, more and more sophisticated, zoomed in on this reduction in change orders, reduction in contingency, reduction in risk.
That's what it really is. Right.
You've taken the risk out. And this goes back to the UK. They're all excited about the money savings. but they're really excited about the predictability now of these projects. Okay, I think I'd like to go another 5 minutes, but schedule, we may have to stop right in the middle of talking about schedule. But so the question here is going to be what is the direct impact on direct cost, not the owner's opportunity, not if this is a hotel, this is an office building that is going to be, if we can get done early, we're going to start generating revenue. So that's a later question. So the first question is, how much does BIM allow you to, if you improve design, reduce change orders, does it reduce delays? Does it improve productivity? Does prefabrication give you an opportunity to actually reduce the schedule, and what would be the impact of that? The big number in your budget that is going to change is your time variable cost in your general conditions. So we'll take a look at general conditions, and the time variable cost, that will be staffing, equipment that you're paying by the month, all the charges for phone and equipment that are on the job, your field office, by the month. You'll still have a lot of your general conditions will be fixed, your mobilization and so on, your setup and tear down will still be the same. But if we can save a month or two, so let's talk about your comparison. What's your benchmark for a project of this size in Boston, this urban environment, in the two-dimensional environment, your old duration, if you will?
So, for a similar project, I mean, I can tell you that
you have to go back in time.
I'd have to go back. I'm going to have to set the Wayback Machine. If I go back to our last project, right? So that's a 24-month construction project, and I know what we did.
That's design and construction.
That was construction.
24 months of construction.
Right.
Okay, so that would be your baseline. You might have 30 months of construction if you include design and the overlap, a 30-month project. So the question is, what might you have for reduction in duration? So that would be design and construct baseline. Let's take a look at what the research is showing us out there in terms of design variation and construction variation or improvement, the impact of BIM. This is a water treatment plant, Mott MacDonald in the UK. Actually, it's a UK based company, but this one is in Pennsylvania. Their design process enjoyed a 20% savings on design time. Now, San Diego reports an improvement on delay. So that's sort of like saying I always get delayed, but I don't get delayed as much. So that's almost like having a contingency. I expect some delay, but I don't get delayed as much. But the difference between no BIM of 80 days of delay, almost 80, and almost 25 days of delay with BIM, that's a 55-day difference. I don't know if that's, I assume that's work days. Here you have the actual days of one particular building from 1,200 to 1,037. So an interesting study. 55 days, even if it was 7 days a week. Still almost 8 weeks. This one is a very, very popular source when calculations are needed. Up to 7% reduction in project time. So 7% of 30 months would be a little over 2 months of acceleration. This one was a 4.1% reduction. Archer Western again reporting, Dan Klansnick reporting some savings, request for information, but also shaving 5 weeks off a 28-month schedule. This is a big number. Infrastructure projects, 30% schedule reduction by BIM workflows. Higher on racetrack projects from American Structure Point. That industrial project that came up before, acceleration of 10 weeks, completed in 14 months. 14% schedule reduction. And this one, 6 months saving on the schedule. This is studied at Stanford, referenced in the Canadian multiple research study from Canada. 6 months savings. That's a $250 million project. So before we get to prefabrication, your 30 months, what have you been thinking in terms of how much reduction might you get from that 30 months?
Well, I think we're going to, this is where it becomes cumulative, right? So you've got better information coming out of the design team, so you see that with fewer RFIs. And since everybody understands the project better earlier, you're going to get less rework. Maybe there's some prefab that's happening as well. So I see us beating our original schedule by 3 months, knowing what we're going to be getting.
So a 10% improvement from the old world. You've gotten a very mature BIM team together, and let's talk about the savings per month. Like, what does that really save me in terms of all those costs? So this would be your staffing, your rentals. You might have a contingency of, or general conditions of 4, 5, 6%, but out of that number, how much is being spent each month just to be there, including your subs?
Right, sure. For a project of that size, GCs are going to be, that's $250K a month, plus or minus, that we're burning.
$250,000 of time variable cost that could be reduced if we could just figure out a way to compress the design and construction schedule. You're burning that money, and they can go on to a job and start doing the next job. Absolutely. And trying to make a profit on the next one, but we don't have to waste time on this project if this is, if we can squeeze this down. So let's put $750,000, 3 months, and that includes the direct cost, the savings in design and construction. Does not include the savings that would come from the owner if we can now turn the keys to the owner and get revenue coming in.